All right. I hope I get this right. Morra Aarons-Mele.
Mealy.
Mele, man.
It's all right.
I get names wrong, but I try. I do try. All the way from the Arctic, otherwise known as Boston. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How the heck are you?
I'm good, Wes. How are you?
I'm good. So,
Good.
interesting background. Hiding in the bathroom, an introvert's roadmap to getting out there when you'd rather stay home. That might be me. I think I'm an introverted extrovert or an extroverted intro. Maybe I'm an
Mhm.
extroverted introvert. Is that possible? Is that a
Oh
thing?
yeah. Oh yeah. That's a thing.
All right. Because I love people, but then they wear my butt out and I got to go back to my cave for a while to refresh.
Yeah. I think that just
So,
makes you human.
yeah. All right. All right. Fair enough. But you've got the anxious achiever coming out. The anxious achiever, turn your biggest fears into your leadership superpower.
Yeah.
No way. Is that
Yeah.
possible? No way. Is that possible?
I mean, haven't you seen Star Wars and just about every other movie out there?
Yeah, but I'm like one of those little Ewoks, you know? I mean, are you saying like I could be Luke Skywalker? Is that possible? Is that in my power?
I think it is in your power. Not all of it, but a lot of it. This
Mhm.
book was really born out of my own lifelong struggle with clinical anxiety and depression, and my big career, and then my curiosity about how other people like me who manage anxiety, depression, or other mental health challenges create the big work life, the great career that they want, even while managing their mental health and taking it really seriously.
Interesting. I've got 7 kids,
Wow.
and 5 of them are girls.
Okay.
And we've been fortunate overall, but we've dealt a little bit with some anxiety, not depression, but certainly anxiety. Is it more prevalent now, or is it just more out in the open?
I mean, that's a question for people who are way more educated than me to answer, I think, but I would say probably both. I mean, we know there's a mental health crisis in this country, and actually 90% of Americans think there's a mental health crisis. Youth mental health is getting worse and worse, and data supports that. And also the amount of Americans who consider themselves either anxious, depressed, or burnt out is really, really high.
Yeah.
Almost 50% of Americans consider themselves burnt out.
Mm. Is that COVID? Is that social media? Is it all the above?
I think it's all the above. I mean, life's always been hard. The reason we have anxiety is because we used to get chased by predators, right? And so anxiety evolved in our lizard brains to say, there might be a tiger around that bush, so you better be careful. Maybe you shouldn't go that way. Maybe you should go another way, right? And when we are met with either the real tiger, which is fear and threat, or the worry that the tiger is there, which is anxiety, our body gets flooded, right? And we go into fight, flight, or sometimes freeze. Our heart rate goes up, right? We have a lot of physical changes, and anxiety evolved for a reason to keep us alive. Unfortunately, now our anxiety is firing on all cylinders over things that aren't technically going to eat us alive, but
Right.
feel like it will.
Yeah. I mean, 10,000 years ago, uh, if a tiger was going to eat you, that's a legit reason to be afraid. Now we're afraid if we don't get enough likes and hearts and comments on a live stream on Instagram. I mean, are we making stuff up? Is this a first world problem? You know, like I shouldn't care. I shouldn't care how many people like a Instagram video.
But you're in sales and you work for yourself, right?
I do.
So there's always that pressure. And the thing
Well, and when I
about,
say I mean, the ubiquitous. I mean,
yes,
my daughters, right? they're not in sales. They shouldn't care how many people like their Instagram.
Well, but if they're teenagers, teenagers have always cared what other people think about them, right? It's a new
Yep.
stage. I think that social media has a lot to do with it because basically it's a system that thrives on anxiety. It makes us
Yeah.
anxious. It makes us feel left out. It makes us want, it makes us feel impulsive. And we get a dopamine hit, which feels really good when someone does like us. So social media is a tool designed to manipulate us in that way. And I also think, the world is really hard and the cost of living is really high. And these are real problems that show up in different ways.
You have an interesting background in business, politics.
Yep.
Can you walk us through just a thumbnail sketch of what led you to this point? I mean, have you always had anxiety and just dealt with it and have still risen to the top of some big industries and big positions?
I've probably always have anxiety. My mom says, when I was 3, I wouldn't leave the house for a year. I had agoraphobia. So I think I was a very sensitive kid, very, very tuned in, hyper-vigilant because of my upbringing, always worried about what would happen next and looking out and taking care. And I had my first episode with clinical anxiety and depression when I was 19 years old at college. And ever since then, it's been something I've managed. I actually have a bipolar 2 diagnosis, which means that I can get very depressed and also have periods of hypomania, which is actually really interesting when you're an entrepreneur. And then sort of chronic anxiety. So it's traveled with me everywhere I went. I had big jobs at a young age, and I really, really tried to make it both in politics and in corporate America. But I found it very, very difficult for my temperament at that time. There was no flexible work. There was no work from home, right? It was a different world. And I had to work for myself because it was the only way that I could fulfill my ambitions and my mission in the world while also being able to take care of myself.
Yeah. I was going to ask, so you rising up in these big jobs, were you just self-motivated yet having anxiety, or it seems like a weird confluence. I would think somebody with those issues would turn inward, become a librarian, a nurse, run off and get married, just be a stay-at-home mom, but
or a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah. But you took a totally different path than what I would assume.
But this is the anxious achiever. I mean, this is the whole point of the anxious achiever, is that there are so many of us who are highly driven, right? Highly driven, whether we were just born that way or we were raised to be that way, or that's the water we drank. We're highly driven. And yet we are also driven by anxiety. It's that sense of, if I'm not the best, who am I? If I don't work harder than everyone else, am I worth it? If I don't go out and get that next client, are my kids going to be able to go to college, right? Anxiety shows up in a way that can be really, really difficult for our mental health, but also motivate and drive us to perform. And it's that contradiction that I explore, because it's possible to understand how and why anxiety is showing up for you, channel it sometimes when you really want that drive, and then be able to say to it, no, thanks, not today. I don't need this today.
Yeah.
And that's possible. It takes work, but it's possible. And that's what my book is all about.
So what's the difference between anxiety and stress? Because, being in sales, I've been stressed, right? Am I going to hit my number? I've been put on performance improvement plans back in the day and had to perform or get fired. I was fired from a job 6 months out of the Air Force, had an infant son. My wife was pregnant. I had to find a job on the classified ads. I mean, was that anxiety or was it stress, or, do
It was
they look
both.
similar?
Yeah, they look very similar. They show up feeling similar. I would say the clinical definition is that stress is put on you. So when your boss fires you or puts you on a performance improvement plan, that's stress. They are putting a stressor on you. They are saying, do this or get fired. When you get fired from your job and you have an infant son, oh my God, the stress, right? But the anxiety comes in when it's that next step of, what if I never get another job? What if this? What if that? What if I can't do this? It's the fear of the future and the uncertainty that kicks in sometimes, especially if we are under stress. But sometimes anxiety kicks in for no reason at all. It kicks in because it's Tuesday. It kicks in because someone you're negotiating with reminds you of someone you really didn't like. I'll never forget, I was in a negotiation with someone who sounded like my first boss, who I really had a difficult relationship. And that made me, in that negotiation, a little bit anxious and thrown off my game. I had to have a conversation with myself and say, this person is making you anxious. Acknowledge that. And here's how you're going to plan for the negotiation.
So the way you've handled this, was it a mixture of like professional help and then just experience and trial and error?
100%. I've been really fortunate to have really great therapists, psychiatrists. I would say over the course of my mental health career, you could call it, I've tried probably 20 different medications. You really have to, when you live with clinical anxiety or depression or bipolar or OCD, you really have to have faith and keep mixing it up to find the right set of meds. It takes time and professional help. And I've also really, really worked hard at giving myself a skill set and surrounding myself with community. I think that the idea of sales and anxiety is really interesting. Sales is also a system that thrives off of a little bit of anxiety because if you're fearing an outcome and you're worrying, are you more likely to pick up that phone and make more calls? I think a lot of salespeople are anxious achievers. And I think also that money is something that makes a lot of us really anxious. And of course, sales is a lot about money. And I've worked with salespeople who have had a lot of anxiety around money. And so it can show up in how they sell and how they negotiate.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, based on my experience, very few people know how to cope with it. I mean, that's why there's such turnover in sales. So many underperform. That's why, like, the top salespeople, like, they don't just earn a little bit more money. It's like multiples. I've seen like 26x of what the mediocre salespeople make. It's just because it's winner take all, right? I always use golf analogies, and I was looking at the Waste Management Open. It just happened in Phoenix. I usually go to it with some college buddies, but we get together and we golf for several days and we go to the tournaments. And but because the Super Bowl was there as well this week, it was just, everything was too hectic, too expensive.
Yeah.
So we put it off a couple of days. But I was looking at the numbers. The winner earned $3.6 million. But the second place guy won 2.2 million.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, hey, I'll take 10th place. I'm not greedy, but in sales and in golf, right? 4 days, 70, 18 holes, par is 72. So over 4 days, and a guy wins by one stroke, it's like 0.02% better per day.
Yeah.
Like not 2%, like 0.02% better. And they win. But if you're 0.02% better than me in a sale, I get nothing. You get 100% of the money. Right. So that's why it's so skewed that, great salespeople, they're just 1% better. They get 100% of the money, and everybody else, like we say in the South, is picking shit with the chickens. And that can bring on some anxiety.
You know what great athletes know, though? It's so funny. Through my podcast, I learned so much, and I love sports. I was an athlete. I interview athletes and sports psychologists. And a sports psychologist who's worked with a couple NBA teams said to me, great athletes are so in the moment, they don't let anxiety come with them on the court. Yeah. Their contract could be out. They could have a million problems, but when they are there, they are able to stay in the moment,
right,
and not jump ahead. And that's why if they make a bad play, it's not about looking back or jumping ahead and worrying and ruminating. It's about, what do I do next? And I think that all of us can really learn from that in terms of managing your anxiety. When you're in a negotiation, you can't be worrying about, is this going to work? Am I going to make my numbers? You have to be present and you have to be connected to the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. I use a lot of sports analogies as well. And, I talk about, a free throw or golf. If Tiger Woods has a 3-foot putt, he can make that left-handed with his eyes closed. It's not a physical thing to make a 3 or a 5 or a 10-foot putt. Mm-hmm. My 8-year-old daughter can hit an 8 or a 20-foot putt. So it's not physical, right? But they'll go through the same routine of lining it up from the front, from the back, from the side, and the same, left hand, left foot, right hand, right foot, waggle, 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 look, waggle, look again. Like, why are they doing that over a 3-foot putt? And, it's that routine that clears the mind.
Mm-hmm. And taps into the muscle memory.
Yeah. And makes you not think about, oh my gosh, there's 100 million people watching this, this one putt, if I make it, so imagine 3.6 million versus 2.2 million. So that's a $1.4 million putt.
Right. And if he got nervous, if he got anxious, yeah. I mean, I think that we have so much to learn from that. And of course, so much therapy for anxiety is based on staying in the present moment. And that's so much of the mindfulness practice that you see happening in workplace cultures. It's all about really trying to turn off your brain from the what ifs and who's watching and am I good enough, and just being present and executing.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people, they don't have good routines, but if I'm playing devil's advocate, the salesperson would say, well, okay, yes, it's a $1.4 million putt, but regardless, the guy's in the running, he's going to make, even if he misses, he makes $2.2 million. Right. For just 4 days of work. And he's got the rest of the season to make another 100 million plus endorsements. Whereas if I don't make this sale, I don't make a payment on my car, right? Or I can't afford health insurance, or I'm behind on my rent. How do you stay present in that moment? Because that's tough.
It's really tough. And you have to acknowledge it. I think that it becomes harder, but it more crucial in a way to stay focused when you really need to be. And that is a skill. It's a muscle that you have to build. It is terrifying when you feel like everything's on the line.
Yeah. Well, my dad always says, if you think you're desperate, you are.
But a lot of people who have anxiety are what's called catastrophists, or they have thought traps. So they have habitual negative thought patterns. And this is really, really important, because when you get in a rut at work, say you miss a bunch of sales and you're in that rut and you start to think, oh my gosh, am I good at this? Am I going to make my car payment? Right? Your brain builds the habit of thinking negatively. And then you start jumping to conclusions, and then you start catastrophizing, and then you start looking at things as all black and white. And that can really further negativity and anxiety. And so you have to sort of retrain your brain to question why it's being so negative and step out of that pattern to get back on track.
How do you do that?
Therapy really helps. There's lots of techniques, but a lot of it is about being mindful and trying to stay in the present moment. A technique I use, and I ran my own business for 11 years and did all the biz dev, is by either playing out a scenario and really going to that worst case scenario, and then asking myself, is this likely? Is this probable? Maybe it's not so bad. or by giving myself a replacement thought. So if I think I'm never going to get this client, I'm too small a firm, saying, well, you've made it to the finals. You have a 50% shot because there's someone else, and give yourself a more neutral, more balanced thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if people saw under the hood, behind the scenes of more businesses, they'd either be a lot more motivated or maybe more terrified, because like, holy crap, this business is this poorly run and is this big. Oh my gosh.
I know.
We're one loose nut away from total catastrophe. But on the other hand, it's like, if they can be that big and they're that messed up, like, I'm not that messed up. So maybe I can be even bigger, because things are messed up, right? I mean, I look behind the door, behind the curtain on a lot of companies, and they are jacked up. Excel spreadsheets, sticky notes. It's like, you're $100 million company and it's all sticky notes.
Look at FTX.
I know, right? I mean, it's imposter syndrome as well, right? I mean, all this kind of feeds into the, I'm not worthy. Like, you're a lot better than you think.
I mean, that's really helpful, right? To get to know your competitive set and be like, okay, they're not as good as I think. I could take them on.
Yeah. But I see what you're saying, though, that they have that negative mindset. And I've got clients, that are that way. And like, if I'm on the outside looking in, it's like, this is a totally accomplished person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you so down on yourself? Like, get a grip, and I try to give them just little things. I get these little baby steps and get some wins.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, that a lot of us anxious achievers look absolutely like we've got it together and we're super self-confident on the outside. You absolutely can't tell. And those people, though, and I count myself as one of them, who start thinking, I'm not good enough, that becomes a habit. And it's really, really important to try to retrain and not do the habit anymore.
Can someone do it alone? I mean, can they get your book and like get better, or will your book maybe just get them on the right path to building the right team, family, friends, professionals to stay on course?
I mean, my book is not meant to replace professional help or therapy. It depends, anxiety, like all mental health, exists on a spectrum, from manageable to I'm having a panic attack and I think I'm dying and I need to go to the ER. And so if you are finding your anxiety is really, really getting in the way of your daily life, you need to go to a doctor. You need to seek professional help. If you find that these consistent patterns of negativity and you're always worrying and you feel like an imposter and you can't stop working because you're so worried, then my book is going to really, really help you. If you feel that you are too fueled by anxiety and it's exhausting you, my book will really help.
Can you share a time when you were really wigged out, I guess, for lack of a technical term, yet still rose to the occasion, on a big stage? I saw some of your videos, like you were doing a lot, like with the Democratic National Committee, right? Like, were you PR or running their social media or
internet marketing? So I did persuasion and advertising and emails.
Okay. So you were the director for that division, right?
For part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's big.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe like things were totally in control for you at that time. But I mean, can you walk us through, like,
I mean, I think for me,
you overcame, right?
I've overcome anxiety so many times I lose count, but for me, it was really about business travel. I was a consultant for many years. When I owned my own business, I would go see clients and I would also go speak and do things to drive the business forward. So I flew a lot, and this was before the pandemic. And I have fear of flying. I have a really, 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 really bad case of flying anxiety. It's not a phobia because I do fly, but flights are really hard for me, especially if I'm alone and not with my family. And yet I would have to fly almost every week. And so I really had to develop a practice to push through that sense of I'm going to die if I get on this plane and never see my children again, which I felt every flight, to say, you also need to provide for those children. This is your work. You need to stay on the plane and not get off. I have been known to have to get off a plane a couple times in my life. But through practice and support, I was able to get to the point of, yes, you feel like you're going to die, but planes are extremely safe. Let's do some breathing. Let's like do our routine, and the flight's going to be okay.
Wow. And you still deal with that, or not as much?
You know, it's funny. It's better. It's better after the pandemic because I don't fly as much, yeah. I think. But it's hard for me. It's hard for me to leave home because I get nervous when I leave home. I get anxious. But it's what my job demands.
Like working for yourself, could you not like shift gears and maybe try to focus locally or regionally where you could drive to appointments? Or like was business just really good? You're like, hey, I got to keep this going.
I mean, my client base was not near Boston. My client base was mostly in Washington, New York, Atlanta, and Seattle. So that's where I was.
Yeah. You couldn't be like John Madden and take an RV all the way to Seattle.
I am no John Madden, that's for sure.
That guy, you know his story, right?
Yeah.
He took an RV everywhere. He would not fly. So I guess that would be a phobia.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, that's amazing. So you've written this book, you know, do you coach people through this, or are you just kind of sharing your story and still do different type of consulting? Like, do you work with people with anxiety and depression, or are you just trying to share your story and let them know that bigger things can be possible?
I mean, I'm in a career transition. I had a business for 11 years and I sold it. And I am now really focusing on workplace mental health because I think it is so important. We have so much attention on mental health in general in this country, but for those of us, a lot of us who spend the majority of our days working, we can't leave mental health outside of the workplace. And so that's my focus. And I'm not a therapist. I don't work therapeutically, but I do coach people. I coach teams, and I do a lot of public speaking to try to spread the word.
So who would be a good audience for you? Like somebody listening to this, how do they know who should reach out to you, like to bring you in to talk? Just any big companies, small companies?
Yeah. I mean, anyone. I love working with sales teams because I sold for so many years. And I actually believe that not only you can use your anxiety to become a better salesperson, but you can use your introversion. You can absolutely sell like yourself. And I am more of a problem solver seller. I listen more than I talk. I try to read the room. I use all my experience managing my own mental health and sussing out motivations and moods to try to understand and read my client. And I actually think a lot of sales is really listening to people and trying to solve their problems. And, you know, anxious achievers are good at that.
For sure. Maybe I'm getting softer in my old age, but early on, and still to a large degree, still, I'm of the old school hard ass, you know, military football, just suck it up, buttercup. You know, and I know there's some people listening to this are like, oh, good grief. Am I going to bring her in and what are we going to do? Light candles and play sound bowls? And, you know, it's like, pick up the damn phone and call your prospects. You know, what do you say to those guys?
I say men have feelings too.
Yeah, I feel hungry. Okay, I agree.
No, I think for too long we have let women have all the feelings, and we view women as emotional, and men don't get to be emotional. This stuff is rampant. It is rampant, and it's a natural human emotion. When you are doing sales, which is basically putting yourself on the line and having people judge you and your product, how could you not get anxious sometimes? How could you not worry? And it's a totally normal thing. And when we understand ourselves, we're better. Like, so much of motivational speaking to me misses the mark, because you have to understand the dark, sad parts of yourself as well as all the strengths, because we all have them. And when you understand your whole self, you're just better.
Mm-hmm. So you're not, again, lack of a better term, right? You're not making excuses for these feelings and these emotions. You're helping people get in touch with them and channel them, shift them. Is that accurate?
All of that. You can shift your emotions, you can channel them, you can manage them, right? Like, just like we teach our kids, we teach our kids when they have a lot of big feelings, right? That it's okay to have feelings, that we understand our feelings and we try to manage through. We give them skills, and it's absolutely the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I always teach, in selling it, the sale, right? You hitting your quota is like losing weight. When you step on that scale, and at the end of the year, those are lagging indicators, right? They just confirm whether you did all of the right steps for the previous 30 days or 90 days or entire year. Did you have water instead of a Coke? Did you have an apple instead of a donut? Hundreds of times, over that previous year. And so, but it is hard to look ahead. Oh, I'm not worthy. Oh, it's no use. I've tried dieting before. Oh, I missed my numbers in my last company. I'm going to miss them here again.
Or it was a fluke. I made my numbers, but it was a fluke. Won't happen again. Lucky.
That big deal landed in my lap. So you're helping get to the core of that. Right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I every year I say it's a fluke, and I say it was luck and it's never going to happen again. And then my husband says, well, here's the evidence. Here's what you did in 2018, 2019. You need to have people in your corner, and also ways to tell your brain to just stop. Look at the evidence. Look over your year and look what you did that really moved the needle, and make a plan to do it again. You can put that anxiety to work by creating strategies and forward planning, and not just sitting there worrying. Yeah. Which doesn't advance anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't let it just sneak up on you and attack. Like, it's coming, so attack it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big proponent of that. And I think also it's really helpful. And this is something therapy can do wonderfully, to look at all the things that happened when you were young that motivate you today, because we also bring our pasts into every transaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Good or bad.
Good or bad. Good and bad.
Yeah. It's like wherever you are, there you are.
Yep.
Yeah, but my wife's very particular about the dishes, so I'm very anxious I'm going to let her down. So I think I'm going to avoid doing the dishes, because I don't want to let her down, and there's a little, spaghetti sauce on the edge of the plate, right? That's wise, right? Right.
That's called learned incompetence.
What?
Yes.
Hey, whatever you call it, good. All right, I've got a name for it. Hey, 27 years, something's working.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Oh, very nice. So where should our listeners go to learn more about you, to get your books?
You know what? If you can remember the term anxious achiever and just go into your search engine, you will find my website, you will find my book, The Anxious Achiever, and you'll probably find my podcast, The Anxious Achiever, which is now in its 8th season. It's a LinkedIn podcast, and it's just full of advice and great stories from leaders who manage mental health challenges.
The Anxious Achiever. All right. A LinkedIn podcast? What does that mean?
LinkedIn has
something new.
Yeah, LinkedIn has a new podcast network. Yeah.
We have to be special like you to get it, or can like I don't know. Me be on there? I don't feel worthy. It would be a fluke if LinkedIn let me have a podcast.
that I don't know.
Yeah, I got to check that out. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Very nice. But I will still link to it. So it'll be in the show notes. Link to your homepage as well. So that's cool.
Thanks, Wes.
Do you ever come to California?
Yeah, I come to LA. I come to San Francisco. Yeah.
I'm not going to LA.
No, sorry. Where are you? I'm
like 90 miles from there. I'm out in the wine country. If you make it out to the wine country, all right.
Oh man.
We'll go wine tasting. I'll make it worth your while.
That sounds amazing.
We got like 50 of them. I'm like 7 minutes from my first winery I belong to.
Oh my God. Woo-hoo. Enjoy. Well, it's great to talk to you, Wes.
Good seeing you. Thanks for coming on. Have a great day.
Bye.